Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Gatlinburg at Christmas time. It's always a beautiful place. Thank you for the attendance today at the committee day of the December 2023 meeting of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission. Please join us in prayer and invocation. Jimmy, you care?
Please bow your head. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful season of Christmas, and we thank you for our agency and our commission that are here to do the good work for the state of Tennessee. We thank you for all our soldiers who are overseas during this time of Christmas, and watch over their families. And we ask that in your name as we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our guests today, Clarence and Laura Dye, faithful attendees, and thank you so much. And Bill Stiver and Ryan Williams with the Williamson with the National Park Service. Thank you for attending. We look forward to your presentation. And all right, moving on. Miss Mary, will you call the roll?
Chris Devaney.
Here.
Jimmy Granberry.
Here.
Monty Blue. Stan Butt.
Here.
Wally Childress.
Here.
Bill Cox.
Here.
Chip Saltzman.
Here.
Hank Wright. Brad Box.
Here.
Rhonda Moody. Kent Woods.
Here.
Greg Davenport.
Here.
Tommy Woods.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Miss Mary. Director Maxedon, any comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the commission. I asked the chairman if I could recognize one other special guest that we have with us today. Mr. John Gregory, do you mind raising your hand? Mr. John Gregory is a retired employee that actually worked here as a regional manager, and John had a distinguished career with the agency for many years as a real estate and forestry chief. One other thing that I want to thank John for, John actually hired me to start work with the agency, so we're excited to have you with us today, Mr. John. Thank you for coming and joining us. Mr. Chairman, I also have a couple of other announcements. As you know, deer season is in full swing now, and I personally have been getting quite a few pictures. I hope you all probably been seeing some of the really nice mature bucks that we've been killing. I actually asked our communications director, Miss Emily, to maybe start a little deal where folks can email in, and we're hoping to see some pretty nice pictures this season. We're going to ask folks to email in if they've killed any bucks that are 140 inches or larger. I think we're going to be impressed to see what's actually happening in the state for this year. Seeing those pictures makes me incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work for this great agency and support wildlife populations and natural resources in our state. This is our December meeting, obviously, and in the Christmas spirit, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you commissioners. Just want to thank you for all the time and the effort that you all put in and for what you do. Also want to thank our staff and our TWRA family. Thank you, staff members. We've had a great year. I appreciate all the hard work that you've put into this past year and what you've done to just make our state better. Thank you for the family that we've all become and united with the commission and the agency and what everybody's doing for the sportsmen of our state. One of the things that I love most about the agency is just how the staff get up and do incredible things. Our staff's always willing to give of their times and their talents to support our state, whether it's law enforcement that are going out and scene of an accident early morning hours, or field staff diligently hosting hundreds of events for youth to introduce them to the joy of hunting and fishing. It's always clear that our TWRA family is made up of servant leaders. Again, thank you for this. As we mark the end of the year and the beginning of another, I hope it brings you a sense of optimism about what the future holds for this agency and the natural resources that we work to protect. Again, thank everybody and appreciate the public for all the great support that you support with our agency. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Director. And it's a pleasure working with the agency, each and every one in the agency. I see more teamwork than I've ever saw in the past. And that's comforting, very comforting. So I'll open the floor to any commissioners that would like to say anything, any opening comments. Anyone?
Welcome to God's country. You're in Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
Amen.
My prayer, I did forget to mention, please pray for Monty Ballew's mother who's sick in the hospital and he wasn't able to make it today with us. So we're lift up Monty and his mother for nothing but good help during this Christmas season.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right. At this time, I'd like to call Bill Stiver, Supervisory Wildlife Biologist for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, for a presentation on research on black bears.
Good afternoon. I appreciate y'all having me. I'm looking forward to giving this presentation. I've been working with TWRA now for about 35 years, and we have a great partnership. And what I'm hoping to do is kind of not only talk about bear management, but highlight that partnership that we've had for so many years. So I thought I'd start out just saying, you know, we've partnered on a lot more species than just black bears. And if you look back, probably started decades ago with wild hog management, and maybe even far back as the 1960s. In the 1980s, deer restoration. You know, we darted deer in Cades Cove and moved them to counties surrounding the park. And then, you know, more recently, both agencies have reintroduced elk. We've also partnered on a lot of non-game species, reintroducing river otters, peregrine falcons, barn owl augmentation in Cades Cove, and again, more recently, bats and the effects that white nose syndrome have on bats. In fact, there was just a bat meeting yesterday, I believe, planning cave surveys, and we were a part of that. But we're here today to talk about bear management. You know, we have a long-term bear management agreement, again, that spans for decades, certainly as long as I've been involved with bears here in the Smokies, and I know that even goes back into the 70s. In fact, that agreement, particularly back in the 70s when we were moving bears, really helped boost some of the bear populations in East Tennessee. And it has also been a management tool for us to handle and move what we would call conflict bears outside of the park onto Forest Service land, hopefully mitigating that conflict and perhaps, you know, having that resource to help mitigate those bear populations. But there's other partnerships that we've done over the years associated with bear management, and again, tied to that agreement. And that, you know, the Big South Fork reintroduction back in the 90s, where we pulled bears from the Smokies, took them up to the Big South Fork, and now we have a rather robust population on the plateau as part of that effort. And that effort, again, was between us, you all, the Big South Fork, and the Tennessee Bear and Boar Association. Through that agreement, we're allowed to use rehabbers, particularly the Appalachian Bear Rescue. So we've had a long agreement with TWRA and ABR to rehab orphaned and injured bear cubs. And within that agreement, any orphaned or injured bear cub that's captured in Blount County, whether it's in the park or outside the park, we release those bears back in the park. It only makes sense that if it was from Sevier County, it probably needs to go back into Sevier County. And so we release those bears back into the park. We've worked together a lot over the years on various types of training. We partnered on bear attack response training with multi-agencies coming for that training. We've hosted the Eastern Black Bear Workshop. We've hosted or co-hosted the International Bear Association Conference. And in 2018, we co-hosted right here in Gatlinburg the 5th International Human Bear Conflicts Workshop, trying to help resolve some of the issues of our human bear conflict issues in East Tennessee. And of course, we've had a long partnership on black bear research. A lot of ecology type work was done in the Smokies back in the 70s and 80s. And more recently, we've partnered on, coming up with an accurate population estimate, not only throughout East Tennessee, but through the Southern Appalachians. But we've had a long history of co-managing and co-dealing with human bear conflicts right here in and around Gatlinburg. The Gatlinburg Problem Bear Task Force was formed in 1989. again, with our agencies as well as the city and the University of Tennessee, looking at what was really driving the human bear conflict issues in and around Gatlinburg. And this task force actually is still in existence today. Some of the findings and some of the challenges back then were, inadequate garbage control, a mixture of interests. There were several things that we identified way back then. I happened to be a graduate student back then, to try to deal with some of the human bear conflicts in and around the city of Gatlinburg. And there were some great accomplishments that were made as part of this task force. One of them being a shared position, the position that's right here in Gatlinburg, dealing with human bear conflicts, a city ordinance, and the proclamation that you all made, right? So we have this city ordinance that requires garbage resistant containers in a certain portion of the city. This green outline is the entire city. The yellow hashed area was the area that was identified. And it was identified because of all the calls that were occurring within that zone. Within that zone, by 2000, the year 2000, everybody had to have animal-resistant containers. And then you all, again, passed the proclamation that you cannot intentionally or unintentionally feed bears in that same zone. So some tremendous accomplishments, back in 2000. But I looked at, sort of what has changed over time, at least in terms of my career. I've been dealing with bears here for 35 years. And if you kind of look back, in the early 90s, the bear population was estimated to be 500. Now it's 1,900. Visitation to the Smokies was 8.5 million. And now this chart says 12.5 million, but we've even hit 14 million. And then the number of residents in Sevier County has doubled. And that doesn't include all the businesses, chalets, restaurants, you name it, all the development that has occurred in Sevier County. And so over time, we have seen an increase in human bear conflicts in the park, growing number, and it just makes sense, right? We got more bears, more people, we're going to have more conflicts. But not only are we seeing more conflicts, but we're seeing more escalated behavior by bears. And what I mean by that is bears that are more, I don't really want to use the, aggressive, trying to tear into buildings, tear into cars, tear into tents, sort of an elevated behavior. We're thinking about it as like, where did this bear come from? How in the world did this bear establish that behavior? Because it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for that type of behavior to develop. And so back in 2015, we partnered together again on our first GPS bear collar study. And GPS collars are the bomb. Let me tell you, you can get some really cool data with GPS collars. And the question we had was, what influence does development outside the park have on human bear conflicts inside the park? And so we put collars on roughly 50 bears, and then we released them on site, and we just let them move on the landscape. And this map kind of displays the findings, and it's a lot of colors, but every color in there is a different bear. And the most significant finding was 90% of the male bears that we put collars on left the park, and 50% of the female bears that we put collars on left the park, right? So that told us that we can do everything right, but if we're not working with our neighbors, we're not working with our partners, we're going to continue to have escalated human bear conflicts, right? And so it really drove home the point that if we're going to manage bears, we have to manage them together, right? We have to manage them as Park Service, TWRA, business owners, homeowners. We've got to do it together because we're sharing this resource. It's going back and forth. Again, 90% of the males, 50% of the females. That's a lot of bears moving in and out of the park. This is a map of the ordinance zone, and the purple dots are individual GPS locations. So you can see some of these bears were moving quite far, well beyond the ordinance zone, in and out of the park, all the way up towards Pigeon Forge. Now, we had an opportunity. This was kind of a unique opportunity. we were working together. There was actually a female bear with cubs denned under a house in Pigeon Forge, and we were working together to figure out how to get that bear out or what to do with it. And once the homeowner discovered that it had cubs, he was okay with leaving the bear there. And so we took an opportunity to put a GPS collar on that bear to see, where does it live? You know, is that a bear that's from the park that somehow ended up out in the county or what? Well, the little yellow dots right there, it's all clustered, is where this bear lived all summer long. She didn't live in the park. She lived in Pigeon Forge. And if you zoom in, this is a zoomed in map, that all those GPS locations are on Wears Valley Road. So I don't know if I have a pointer here or not, but that's the main drag in Pigeon Forge. And then at the Wears Valley Road turns left, and her home range is right near Pigeon Forge High School. So if you're going up there and you're looking left as you're driving out of Pigeon Forge, that's where she lived. She didn't even live in the park at all. And she has cubs. So you have reproducing females that are clearly living out in the county that have nothing to do with the park, as a matter of fact. So that was our first GPS study. The more recent one is looking at what happens to bears that get into conflict and we end up moving them, right? So we only have a couple of options when we start seeing bears with elevated behaviors. You know, we can leave it there and try to work with the landowner or whoever to clean it up. We can kill it, or we can move it. And certainly we've moved bears over the years, both agencies. We move maybe 8 to 10 bears a year out onto Forest Service land, and we move maybe 4 or 5 within the park. But we wanted to know what happened. And sort of the foundation for that, there was couple of research projects done based on ear tag data that looked at what happened to relocated bears. And the first study was years ago, and that was my study as a graduate student. And we found that about a third of the bears that we moved, and this is park data, came back, and about 57% were unknown, and just under 10% were killed, mostly from hunter harvest. So we knew that moving, and the other finding from that study was you really had to move them longer distances to prevent them from coming back. And that 64 kilometers is equivalent to 40 miles. And there's very few places in the park that we can move bears 40 miles. So again, going back to our cooperative agreement, we realized that, you know, if we were going to be effective in moving bears and preventing them from coming back, we needed to move them, you know, further and out onto Forest Service land. So I had a student from the University of Alabama come to me. He was a geography student, was looking for a project. I said, hey, let's reevaluate our data. You know, we've been moving bears out of the park. We've had a different strategy for years, and let's see what we find. And one of his biggest findings was 74% of the bears that we move, we never hear from again, right? A small percentage, and this again was all based on ear tag data. And so the assumption might be, well, everything's fine. You don't ever hear from those bears again. So we wanted to answer that question. What happens to that 74%? So we put GPS collars on 51 bears. And we've been doing this for several years to get a large enough sample size. We have a graduate student that's been working on the project the last 3 years. And this was her last year of field data. And this information is somewhat preliminary. But the big take home for me, at least, was 2/3 of these bears are dead in 4 months, right? 2/3 are dead in 4 months. I'm having a hard time seeing it's 40-some% are harvested. And half of those are in North Carolina, half of those are in Tennessee. A portion, I think it's 12% are killed by cars and 9% or something like that for depredation outside the park. So 2/3 are dead in about, on average, 132 days. I highlighted it here in the chart. The other really amazing finding was the movements of these bears. I don't know if you all picked up on the story of bear 609, but bear 609 was a bear that we caught in the Elkmont area, and we moved her to South Cherokee National Forest. She immediately went south. She went down to Alpharetta, Georgia. Then she went east. She went to Clemson, South Carolina. Then she went north and circled around Asheville. come around, crossed I-40, came into the park, went all the way to Klingman's Dome, was literally within a couple of miles of where we caught her. She turned south, went straight down through North Carolina, back over to Ellijay, Georgia, kept going west, and then turned south, went into Alpharetta, Georgia, downtown Alpharetta, Georgia. She tried to get into a mall. She got hit by a car. Then she turned and went back east again through Gainesville, Georgia, back up through Clemson, back around into North Carolina, and then she went west again and actually settled and denned, I don't know, maybe 20 miles north of where we let her go on Cherokee National Forest. That bear traveled 1,000 miles. We released her on June 1st, and by December, she traveled 1,000 miles. So that was really eye-opening. We've seen some other long-range movements by some of these female bears, but nothing like that. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that we can take this information and really share it with homeowners, the importance of being bear wise. I mean, if they truly care about bears and they want to protect bears and they don't want bears dying, then we need to clean up, whatever food sources we have out there, so that we as managers are not stuck with a situation where we have to move bears, right? If we're being bear wise and have a bear wise community, then we're not in a position where we have to move bears, because we're still going to have to move bears. I just don't think we can get away with that. But people hopefully will understand that that's not the best solution. You know, when they call you, they want you to move it deeper in the woods and they think it lives happily ever after. I'm here to tell you that they don't live happily ever after. They're 2/3 are dead in about 4 months. With that, I'll quit. All right. Well, again, I appreciate it. Appreciate you all. Appreciate what you do for the state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Stryber. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Anyone have any questions? All right. Commissioner Butt?
Yes,
Hold on, Bill. 1 second. I'm sorry, you got away too quick.
Yes, sir.
My question is, if human interaction is part of the problem, then we have cubs or injured bears that are rehabbed. Does that not increase their common relationship with humans? And when we put them back in the park, that's part of the problem where bears interact with people?
Actually, we actually did a research project with the Appalachian Bear Rescue, and very few of those orphaned or injured bear cubs that are released back in the wilds cause conflict. Yep.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Coy
Anyone-
Blair did his master's thesis on that. Yep.
That Bear 609 traveled 1,000 miles. It's kind of incredible. What explains why do they roam so much?
I have no idea. I mean,
I didn't know
other
you
than,
guys
you know,
discovered that.
it was interesting to me that she was so close to her home range. I mean, all she had to do was drop off the ridge and she was home. And instead of turning right, she turned left and took a whole nother loop. And, the student is analyzing that data. And from what I can recall, it seems like the females actually are traveling more than the males. But again, some of that is preliminary. We're looking forward to her finishing her thesis and providing some additional data for us. But it was really shocking to see such long movements. It made national news. It hit Canada, it hit the Philippines, it hit Europe. It went all over the world on that bear's movements.
That is amazing. Commissioner Cox?
Well, we actually went to her den last winter and we changed the collar out, and she did not have cubs. We were expecting, she should have had cubs. She was old. She had cubs previous. Should have bred. She did not. I don't know if that traveling was what caused her not to have cubs. We swapped her collar, and she was active on the landscape until June, and then we had a collar failure. And so we have not received any other information since June.
Was she still traveling while you were?
Yes, she actually went down to Georgia and then came back up to Cherokee National Forest. when she came out of her den. I thought she might show up in the harvest at some point. We have had some of the collared bears obviously show up in the harvest. Like I said, half of them have shown up in Tennessee harvest. The other half that have been harvested, they've crossed into North Carolina and been harvested.
This population graph that you had, is this for the park?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the 500 to 1900. That's the difference in the estimate over time. And that 1900 estimate, again, is part of the cooperative work that Dan has been doing with the Southern Appalachian region, where we got an estimate not only for the Smokies, but North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and I think South Carolina. Yep. So again, we've been tremendous partners. I've got some former employees of mine, Kim and Brandon and Steph. This has been a great partnership for my entire career. I really appreciate what you guys do.
One thing, Bill, the first time I believe I ever read your name was in a book
Uh-oh.
called A Bear in the Backseat.
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I would encourage everyone to get that book, A Bear in the Backseat. It is, it's really funny,
Yeah.
and it's got some serious moments in it as well. So, sure enough. Any other commissioners?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Along those same lines, 1954, when I was just a young man, my granddad and grandmama and my mom and dad and other three boys made a trip to Gatlinburg and pulled over like many of the other tourists. And one of the bears came up and stuck his head inside a 1951 four-door Plymouth and wouldn't get out. And my granddad lit up his pipe and blew smoke in his face and finally got him to get out, and they rolled up the window. And so that was one of my earlier experiences with human interaction with bears in Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
So we all need to take up cigarettes or cigars, right? Start blowing smoke at them.
Good. Again, thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it.
So this
Thank
Bear
you.
in the Backseat book is 2 volumes. Is that right?
Yes. So that's Kim Delosier. He was my boss. He was in my position for 30 some years. I took over for Kim. I worked for Kim for 20 years and then took his position in 2011. And, you know, if you want to have a side conversation, we can give you all kinds of stories about David and Willard and all that kind of stuff. We could probably write our own book, to be honest.
But this Bear in the Backseat is 2 volumes.
He has 2 volumes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a good read. It's
Yes.
really funny. Sure
Yeah.
enough. Again, thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. All right, let's continue to hear about bears. At this time, I'd like Dan Gibbs, TWRA Black Bear Coordinator, to come to the podium for another presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods. Before I get started, just kind of follow up on the 2 questions that the commission had. So ABR, there was a real good question about what kind of issues you have with those cubs because they are in a rehab facility. And the fact that we don't have issues is a testament to what ABR is doing and their goal to minimize the contact with those bears. So they get very little contact, and unless it's a very, very small cub, there may be a little bit more contact at the beginning, but even in those situations, they're doing everything they can to minimize that contact. So that's why we don't have those conflicts. And very important part of their program is to see that doesn't happen. And then Bear 609, another thing that we've talked about, and it's just speculation, but all that movement could just be due to stress. The stress of being moved and not knowing where they are, other bears pushing them out of their territory, getting into conflicts with other bears and things like that. So stress could have a big impact on that as well. All right. So I'm going to go pretty quick today. I've only got, I think, 11 slides, and I'm just going to mention a few things and then leave it open to the commission with any questions they may have to expand on any of this. But I want to talk just a minute about how this last project the park has done will impact the agency. A few minutes about a survey that we recently did with Tennessee residents, give you some preliminary numbers on 2023 conflicts, and then I have a harvest update, and then I'm going to have a real short video that we received yesterday that I want to show you. So all this stuff that Bill talked about this last survey of what's happening to these bears. This is important information for us because I've talked before about the perception's reality. And for most people, perception is reality. And the public has this perception that when you let these bears go, they live happily ever after. And so when they think it's just a matter of catching the bear and taking it somewhere else where it quote unquote belongs, you don't get any response from your landowners. They continue to leave their chickens out free ranging with no fence. They don't put fences around their bees. They don't secure their trash. Whatever the attractant is, you're typically not going to get a response in securing that attractant if you just take that bear away. Well, this data that the park has provided for us, now when you present these people with this data, it shatters that perception. And we know that people don't want these bears to be injured. They don't want them to be killed. And a lot of times we don't even get calls about these bears until the conflict is elevated to such a high level. They feel like they have no other choice because they're afraid we're going to kill them. So they don't want them to be hurt. So when you give them this information, now they're more interested in those alternatives of putting electric fence up or securing their trash or not feeding birds when bears are active and things like that. So this is how this information is going to be used within our agency a lot when we're dealing with people one-on-one to be able to give them that data. So 2023, you can already see the number of bears that we've relocated has dropped quite a bit compared to last year and even our 3-year average. And part of this is just us being even more in tune to what bears we're moving to make sure they're good candidates for moving. But we also haven't had as many people demanding that bears be moved, and they're more willing to try some alternatives. So you can see a decrease there, and we hope that continues over time. So we recently did a public opinion survey, and we're still finishing it up, polishing up. So these numbers would still be preliminary, but I wanted to share the results of 6 questions with you real quickly, and we'll have more on this at another date. But so we asked people, do you enjoy seeing bears, and do you believe they're important to the ecosystem? We had 93% of residents say that, and the residents that were surveyed in this survey, basically regions 3 and 4, and it's broken down to a lot of bears, a few bears, or bears are just showing up. But people that are living with bears, 93% believe they're important to the ecosystem. And 86% believe that people and bears can coexist. 88% believe that the conflicts that we're seeing are because bears are taking advantage of unintentional food sources, that's true. That's what's going on. And the public recognizes that that's the problem. That's a good thing. Even 76% say it's up to people to take preventative action. Would like to see that be a little bit higher, but it's higher than what you would expect. But when you give a general question about, so would you support laws and ordinances that address these issues of attractants, you get about 2/3 support for that, which is a little bit lower, but 17% really don't care one way or the other. So in my mind, I would throw them into the yes category, right? So if they're not going to complain about it, then that's good. So there's still even support for that. But when you get to a specific question about would you support a law that prohibits intentional feeding of bears, you get 88% support for that. So, and I show you all this to show that the things that we're doing as an agency that we're trying to push and the message we're trying to send, the public supports this stuff. So to conflicts real quickly, we have to date as of the end of November, 1,186 calls that were put through dispatch and given to either an officer or a biologist to address. And that's higher than any other year we've had so far and above our 3-year average. And as usual, garbage makes up almost 1/4 of those calls. And the thing that is important to realize, and I believe I mentioned this the last time we talked, is the garbage is also what turns into these behavioral related calls that we get. Hey, this bear's hanging out on my front porch. It's staying in my yard. It won't leave. It's here every day. It's getting my pet food. It's bird seed. All these things you can almost always, even getting in vehicles, you can usually trace this back to garbage. That's where it all begins, is the garbage, because it's easy to get. They get it at nighttime. They get it on the, like I said, on the cover of dark. That's where it all starts. And then you elevate it to these behavioral related issues down the road that cause us a lot of issues. So the number of conflicts that we've had this year so far, our top 5 counties, no surprise, Sevier County leads the state with 29% of our calls. And then I want to back up. So we've had 341 calls in Sevier County. We were in a meeting a few weeks ago where there was an officer from Gatlinburg in that meeting. And at that time, so we're talking about in October, they had already had over 1,000 calls to the city about bears. So we're not the only agency getting these calls. When you look at Sevier County and break it down, you see that last 3 years, and traditionally Sevier Gatlinburg is going to make up at least 50% of your calls in Sevier County. But this year, you see the number of calls in Gatlinburg and Sevierville are pretty much, they're neck and neck right now. And this is a function of some of the maps you saw from Bill that shows these bears are moving beyond Gatlinburg now. They're living in Sevier County. They're living in the city. And we're starting to see more and more conflicts outside of Gatlinburg. So I want to show you this map real quick. And this is from one of the bears, that last study that Bill mentioned. And I believe the caller is still on this bear. So this is about 80 days worth of movements real recently. And if you look at the circle on the left, you can see that there's obviously something going on here, right? There's something that this bear really likes within this circle. And if you pull all that blue out, you're going to find a couple of hotels with dumpsters. And that's where that bear is going. And it's very direct. And this bear goes here on a regular basis because that's where it's getting food. But what's real important in this picture is where the bear is not going. The circle to the right is the Park Vista. If you'd done this same study 25 years ago, that circle would be just as blue as the one to its left. Willard and David can tell you plenty of nightmare stories about the Park Vista in the late 90s, but they made a decision to do something different, and they get their trash under control. And you can see bears move through that property, but they're not stopping. And it's because they're not finding anything to eat. And I tell people this all the time. Janelle tells people, all of our folks tell people, we can't keep a bear from walking through your property, but we can tell you how to keep it from stopping. And that's what we need them to do, is not stop. So I mentioned dumpsters. The Gatlinburg dumpsters have been a real issue. And my circles dropped out. But if you look, I don't know if there's a pointer on here. I don't think there is, but there's little cables hanging down on these dumpsters. And what's supposed to happen is when someone throws their trash in, they're supposed to lock the dumpster. Well, you can't depend on people to do that. People steal the carabiners that cities use. The dumpsters get broken when they're dumped. So really big problem that's driving a lot of this. And what really needs to happen is to see these kind of dumpsters put in place where you have this paddle latch. So when this door shuts, it's locked. You don't have to rely on somebody to latch it. And the good news is Gatlinburg is in the process, beginning in January, to start putting 460 of these on the landscape at a tune of $2.6 million. So bear management is not cheap, but the city is investing a lot of money into these new dumpsters, and we're really excited about it. But I can tell you, these bears are going to go somewhere else, right? So it's just a matter of what's the next step. When they quit eating out of these dumpsters, we got to be ready to address where they go at that point. They say when the stars line up, good things happen. And I don't know about stars lining up. We're seeing a lot of good things happen. We're gathering relevant data that's helping us. We're seeing high public support for what we're trying to do. Bearwise is showing to be effective. We're getting a lot of interest in Bearwise. Governments are responding, businesses are responding, and communities are responding. And Bill mentioned the Smoky Mountains Bearwise Task Force briefly, and they are still active, and they're a big part of what's going on with the governments, businesses, and communities. And then lastly, what's really exciting is that the cost share program that we asked for has been funded, and we're really excited to see where that goes. We're already getting some interest from some different entities about when that's going to go live. And I've been working with legal on the the application process and how we do our selection. So hopefully we'll have something out this winter and be ready to start awarding some grants to see what people are willing to do to move forward. So real quickly, the harvest this year, it's starting to pick up. It was down at one point over 100 bears, and now we're down as of Tuesday about 44 bears. The biggest part of that decrease has been zone 2, and that's just due to there's a very good mass crop in the park this year. And one thing is really important to think about Bill's data. He's telling you about the number of bears that leave the park. Even though the park doesn't have a hunting season, those bears are very susceptible to hunting if they don't have food. And we see that every year. What we harvest in Bear Hunt Zone 2 is really a function of what's available in the park for food. And this year, Cott County which pushes 100 bears a year, is way down, way down. And that's driving a lot of it. And then we're having a pretty good harvest in Johnson and Sullivan County both of those counties are way up to what they've done in the last few years. So not as many acorns. So those bears are moving. So with that, I'm going to show you a video. Janelle's going to hand out these for you. So one of the things that we're trying to do is start identifying barriers to what's keeping people from doing some of these things that are important to reduce conflicts. And one of the things that we talk a lot to people about is to try to come up with a way to secure your trash can so bears can't get into it. And unfortunately, they go about it the wrong way. They put a bungee cord on it or a ratchet strap or something like that, and the bear just gets into it and tears it up. So we had a little flyer that says, hey, you can build straps like these, and they work pretty well. But the problem is you're depending on the landowner to go out and buy the screws, buy the straps, buy the buckles, get the ones that are the right weight, limitations that they need. Then they got to put it together. So it's a real barrier to get people to do this. So we bought a bunch of supplies, and ABR used their volunteers to make these packets for us, and we've started handing these out. And they've been well received. And I want to show you a video real quick that Janelle got yesterday, and this is from Carter County around the Johnson County border. Do I need to hit it again? There we go. One of the important things we tell people is once you put these on, you need to secure it with something to a tree or a post so they can't turn it over. Because if they turn it over, they'll start pressing on it and pop it. So this is what he's trying to do now, is turn it over. But the guy has it tied. All right, so I wanted to show you that. He didn't turn it over. It comes back up. But this landowner, Janelle, said he had so much stuff on his trash can to try to keep bears out that in order to put these on, he had to call the city and get a new can because he couldn't put them on because of all the stuff he'd already tried. But I handed these out, and if you really want to keep one of these, you can. But if we really need these back today because it's kind of last minute. I'll get you one if you want one. But I want you to be able to see how simple they are. It's kind of tricked you there, didn't I? But hey, I'll send you, if you leave yours today, I'll send you 2. How does that sound? It's like an infomercial, right? But Janelle, these are going out this week. One of our officers is going to be handing these out this week. So, but the thing that's important here is we have a very, very happy customer in Carter County. And I promise you, he's going to tell everybody he knows that TWA came out and gave him this, and it's keeping bears out. And they're going to be calling us, and they're going to know where they can get theirs. So it's this is about $4 for us to buy the supplies for these. But what we're getting out of it, and we didn't get into it, but when you start talking about what it takes to go trap a bear and move it from a manpower perspective and a cost to the agency in fuel and time, if you're taking a bear from Sevier County all the way down to Monroe County and back, just the fuel and the amount of time that's in itself is very expensive, and it may take you 2 or 3 days to catch the bear. And you're running traps, you're checking traps. It's very expensive. So if we can get people to do these kinds of things rather than trap the bear, move it, and then have the next one that comes along do the same thing, we're way ahead of the game. So with that, I'll be quiet and take any questions you may have.
Dan, thank you so much. The positive results we see are directly due to you and Janelle's hard work. I can tell you're passionate about what you do, and the results show that you're out there every day doing what you're supposed to be doing. And
Thank you.
sure enough. Any comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Granberry.
You said the conflicts for 2023 were up substantially. Any injuries from the bears? Anything to report?
Yeah, we've had a couple. None of the what a person would consider a bona fide attack, a predatory type attack, but we've had some injuries where people have gotten swatted. A couple of them were unfounded. One just recently we had that guy got a few stitches, and he was trying to get his dog away from the bear. The dog was getting aggressive with the bear. The bear was trying to leave, but then the dog got up there, and the gentleman ran up to get his dog, and he got slapped. So, it's not. We haven't had as many as we did last year, but every year you're just thinking it's going to happen, and part of it is that people just don't have a healthy respect or a healthy fear. I mean, we tell people you don't need to be afraid of bears, but you need to fear them in a respectful way, if that makes sense. And that's what we're trying to get people to understand. These are wild animals, and they can be unpredictable. And just because it's been in your yard 10 times and you haven't had any issues with it doesn't mean that something isn't going to happen the 11th time. And usually that happens is when you startle it. You walk around the corner and it's there and it's trying to get out of the way and it runs over you or something to that effect.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Butt.
Dan, this year down in Murray County and Williamson County and Davidson County, we had several encounters and several sightings. For the last 2 years, it's been reported to me that there was bears on 43 going from Columbia down towards Lawrenceburg. We actually had them on trail cams in different places. And one of the bears that I'm referring to took up residence for 2 or 3 days at the agency headquarters. Did we attempt, or is there an attempt for those bachelor bears or those bears that are outside the normal area to be collared to do research on them to see where they're going and why they're moving? And then I heard that one of those bears ended up back up in Kentucky. So it's kind of like 609, some of them just going to travel everywhere.
Well, no, there's not been any work done as trying to catch those bears. And those bears are typically pretty hard to catch because they are on the move. And it's funny, or kind of ironic, I guess, is Janelle and I were actually in Nashville when that was going on, giving a little bit of training to the Region 2 personnel on things like that. And our recommendation is to, now, if you're trying to catch the bear, do some research, that's one thing. But our recommendation, as much as possible, is to let those bears do their thing and use the opportunity to educate people and let them move on. Because what we don't want to do in Region 2, where we'll be seeing more and more of this kind of stuff as time goes on, is to create that expectation that if a bear shows up on your property, TWA is on the way with a trap, because we already know now what's going to happen. So what we want to do is try to get people, use that as an education opportunity and teach them what to do. But most of these bears are young males that are trying to figure out where they're dispersing from their mother, and they're looking to set up a home range. And as used to be this kind of activity you would see in the central part of Region 3, in Knoxville and Chattanooga and Meigs County and those counties there, where you didn't have a lot of bears, but you would see these sightings in the springtime with the males. Well, now these areas have breeding populations, so their young are the ones that are showing up south of Nashville. And then the north end, those bears are probably coming from Kentucky. Kentucky, that big South Fork population is a very healthy, that population is doing well. So bears that you're seeing on the north end up that way are most likely coming from that population and not the Smoky Mountains.
And the other question that I had was last year when we were here observing some of the nuisance bears in the park and in the city. We observed a lot of some of the pictures that you showed of those canisters where they were left open, food and boxes were piled up on top of one another. They weren't enclosed. And Mr. Schreiber mentioned the ordinances in the city that have been passed. Is there any education, or is there enough education going into business owners, particularly restaurants that have lots of those types of issues, to get them to understand that they're adding to the problem and teaching or instructing their employees as to how to handle?
There are efforts, and most of the time the efforts are one-on-one as those conflicts happen. I know we're trying to do a little bit more work with local police departments, because a lot of times I mentioned the Gatlinburg gets 1,000 calls a year, the police department, to try to educate those folks, the officers, to help with that, to give out the right information when they talk to these people. But I believe as far as businesses go, these dumpsters are going to go a long way. There's a lot of conflict as far as, hey, the dump truck driver, the trash truck driver broke the dumpster. So right now these people own that dumpster and they're not very willing to fix it because they think that the city broke it. So I'm not going to fix it. You guys broke it. You need to fix it. So you get this standoff. Well, this new program, the city is going to own these dumpsters and they're going to rent them on a monthly basis. So when they break now, the city is going to get them and go fix them. And they have those automatic lids. So I think that's going to help. But Janelle's done a lot of work talking with these different business owners, whether it be like a hotel or even a restaurant. And they're starting to get the idea, we're kind of planting that seed of liability. And so now we've got some places where basically the business managers told the employees, if we see you doing certain things, you're fired. So they're starting to get it, and it takes time, but yeah, we're working on that and getting there. It's just a very slow process when you look at what we're facing with the number of businesses we have. But so those straps, they're real good for raccoons as well, just so you know. And seriously, if any of you, yeah. If any of you want, we just kind of a last minute thing, but if any of you do want a set of those straps, let me know and I'll get them to you. And I appreciate the time. So go ahead, Bill.
Just to add a little more to what Dan had said, the Smoky Mountain Bearwise Task Force, historically, Dan and I led that group for many, many years. And we've taken a different approach where we're actually consultants for the group now. And what we're doing is we're getting business owners in and around the city to be in the group and be part of the decision making, be part of the effort to educate their employees, their other businesses in the community. So Dan and I are we're technical advisors now for that task force that's been around since 1989. And our thought is if we can get buy-in from the community to run this task force, we're going to be a lot more successful at educating businesses on what they need to do to be bear-wise.
Yeah. And to that point, I've got several acquaintances and friends that have camps up Big South Fork and different areas up in Clay County and up Overton and along through there. And it appears to me that they're going to have to understand they can't leave food in those small campers. They'll just destroy the campers to get in to get the food. And that causes problems. So, they've got small campsites or small campers. And so that's creating an issue up that way, because I've had 2 or 3 that questioned me about it. So,
yeah, every situation is different. The conflict and the attractants on camping areas is a whole nother ball game and a whole nother presentation. And we spent a lot of time in the Forest Service this year having those conversations. And we're actually, just so you know, we haven't got anything worked out, but I'm trying to work with the state parks to have some training, to have a kind of a training workshop for state parks this winter. This is another thing we have on our wish list to get done, is to start working with those state parks and trying to get them up to speed on some things. Thank you, everyone. Have a Merry Christmas.
Anyone else? Anybody got any more comments? Director? Again, Dan, Bill, Janelle, thank you all so much for your hard work. I'll pause for just a second and recognize a really special person that entered the room. Miss Danette, recently retired, the mother of several directors, executive directors, kept them in line for years and has trained Miss Mary well. So we just wanted to recognize you and welcome you to our meeting. It makes us feel good that you come back to visit. So, all right, moving on. At this time, I'd like to ask Assistant Chief Wally Akins to come forward for an update on the Milan hunts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Commission. I want to share some news today about our Milan turkey hunts. The quota hunts that were scheduled for this coming April and May of next year have been canceled at the request of the Tennessee Army National Guard. During these ongoing deer hunts that is going on, the National Guard staff recognized and had some concerns about site logistics. They wanted to try to take a pause and make some corrections to the hunt process. They have site requirements at Milan, and the National Guard would like to, adhere to those requirements, but at the same time offer a quality hunting experience to the public. So they asked us to put these turkey hunts on hold so they could work through some of that hunt process that they have. They want to, it's not going to affect the ongoing turkey or deer hunts that's ongoing now, and it doesn't mean that we will not be able to have turkey and deer quota hunts in the future. Ultimately, we surely appreciate the partnership we have with the Army National Guard and look forward to working with them in the future to support opportunities to have quota hunts there in the future.
Excellent. Any questions for Mr. Akins at all? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. I'd like to ask Region 4 Fisheries Manager Jim Habera. And I'd like to say something before we get started. We had a good man retire this year in Region 4's fishery. Bart Carter had been with us a number of years and just did an outstanding job. We also have a good man to replace him, and that's Mr. Habera. So welcome and congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you, Chairman Woods. Bart left some really big waders to fill. So
He sure did.
Try to do that.
Yes, you're exactly right, but I'm certain you'll do a great job.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We've kind of talked about the iconic terrestrial species here in the mountains. So now I'd like to talk about what I think is the iconic aquatic species here in the East Tennessee mountains, which is our brook trout. Okay, so brook trout are Tennessee's only native trout. They're important to us because of that. They're indicators of ecological integrity. They're genetically quite diverse, very different from brook trout in other parts of their range in the eastern United States. And they're also part of the angling legacy here in the southern mountains and especially in East Tennessee. So they're very important to us for those aspects. Historically, brook trout once occupied all the cold water habitat here in East Tennessee, but now that's down to about 25%. And most of that distribution loss occurred during the late 19th century on into the middle part of the 20th century, primarily as the result of habitat alteration. Currently, we have 147 miles of brook trout water and 119 streams, and that's outside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And those populations are typically located above about 2,700 feet in elevation. 70% of the distribution is on the Cherokee National Forest, and the other 30% is on privately owned lands. So this map shows the distribution of brook trout habitat patches along the eastern border of Tennessee, and we're here in Gatlinburg, right on the doorstep of the park. So those patches you see there in that area are within the park, and then to the northeast are the habitat patches in Region 4. And then down here in Monroe County in the Little Tennessee Basin are the brook trout populations down there. The blue patches are where brook trout occur alone, and then those other colors represent where you have brook trout in combination with either rainbow or brown trout. So brook trout restoration and enhancement work dates back in Tennessee to the early 1980s or so. But just until recently, we've not really had any comprehensive plan to guide those efforts. So when we updated our statewide trout management plan back in 2017, we thought it was time to develop a native brook trout management plan to deal with that species. So we did that, and it's in that current plan. That native brook trout management plan's got 4 focus areas: assessment, habitat protection, restoration, enhancement, and outreach. So we're about at the midpoint. We're 6 years into that plan. So Region 3 and Region 4 fisheries staff got together a couple of weeks ago to just kind of take a look at where are we with respect to achieving the goals and objectives that are in that plan. So what I'd like to do going forward here, just highlight some of the accomplishments under the assessment and restoration and enhancement focus areas. So the first, or the primary goal under assessment is to complete, or was to complete, a new brook trout genetics inventory. That genetics inventory is critical. Genetics information is like it is in just about everything we do in fisheries now. Very critical to managing that species. We need to know where our native populations are, so we can prioritize those for doing any kind of management. Particularly, we need to know where the native populations are that could serve as donor populations when we do a restoration project. So we got all that DNA collected, all the fin clips, analyzed those with microsatellite DNA, got the results back in 2018, 2019 in that area. And we're very pleasantly surprised to see that 76% of those populations that we have out there on the landscape now are native, what we would consider to be native populations. So essentially unaffected by any stocking of hatchery brook trout over the years, which did occur fairly extensively across East Tennessee. Another 8% are hatchery influenced to the point where we couldn't manage those as a native population. And then another 15% are directly descended from those hatchery stock brook trout, very genetically different from our native Tennessee fish. So those they would have a very low management priority, although we may drop down to those streams at some point and do some restoration projects with those. And in fact, we've already done one that I'll speak about in just a minute. But those hatchery brook trout stocks that I mentioned are not from Tennessee. They're from fish stocks in the northeastern United States, New England, Pennsylvania, that area. So very different genetically from what we have here in Tennessee. So the native populations, and there's 81 of those out there right now, they're distributed as shown here in this pie chart by river basin. And most, probably 80% or so, are in Upper East Tennessee, in the South Holston and the Watauga basins. And then we've got 8 each in the Little Tennessee, which is the Region 3 populations, and 8 in the French Broad. Just 1 in the Nolichucky Basin right now. And that population has only been there a few years. That's a project that we did with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. They had some fish native to the Nolichucky Basin in the North Toe River system over in North Carolina. So we partnered with them to collect some fish from a couple streams. They were gracious enough to let us do that and bring those back to Tennessee. So those fish are now in a stream in Greene County on the Cherokee, have gotten established. So we're looking forward to using those to do more extensive work in that river basin. And then as far as restoration enhancement, the primary thing we wanted to do there was increase our native brook trout distribution by 13 to 15 miles by the end of our management plan term, which is 2027. And along with that work, we wanted to make sure that we get native fish back into some of these subwatersheds within each of those river basins where they've been completely lost. There are no streams at all in some of those subbasins that have brook trout any longer. So that was an important thing to accomplished there as well. And these brook trout restoration projects typically involve first removing an existing wild rainbow trout population that's already in that stream. And this is the most labor intensive part of one of these restoration projects. And it involves multiple electrofishing passes with backpack gear like you see in the photo there to get these rainbows out. Typically takes two, if everything goes really well, it takes 2 years to get those out of there. And then we're ready to bring in the native brook trout. And we do that by a process that we call translocation. We'll select 2 or 3 streams that have the appropriate genetics for that particular stream that we're looking to restore. The other thing we've got to consider too is the abundance of fish, of brook trout in those donor streams, because we certainly don't want to damage those by taking too many fish out of there to move to our restoration stream. We typically need 200 to 300 fish for a standard restoration project that's about 1 mile in length. So it's quite a few fish, and we'll try to pull those out of 2 or 3 streams and get some additional genetic diversity that way as well. So what we do when it comes time to translocate them, usually early September, mid-September, we'll get together and go out to these streams that we've identified, collect those fish. And in this case, we're looking for everything we can get, young of the year and subadults and adult fish, because we're trying to create what I call an instant brook trout population in the restoration stream. So we'll collect those, move them down to a collection point, get them ready to haul, and then transport them to the new stream and release them there. And that whole process takes place in 1 day. So it can take a pretty large size crew to get that work done. Now, in cases where the genetically appropriate donor streams do not have the numbers of fish we really need to do a restoration project, then we'll go to propagation. And we've done that in 2 places over the years, typically down at the brook trout hatchery at Tellico, or more recently at the Tennessee Aquarium Conservation Institute. We call it TNACI down in Chattanooga. They've got a really nice recirculating system down there that they can hold these fish in, get them ready to spawn, and then spawn and produce progeny that we can release the following spring. And they actually came out with us this summer and got some fish from that one native population in the Nolichucky Basin. So I got my fingers crossed that they're gonna do well down there, and we're gonna get some fingerlings to stock in a second stream in the Nolichucky Basin this spring. So this chart basically summarizes the successful restoration projects that we've done over the past 6 years. And you can see most of those are in the Cherokee National Forest in both Region 3 and Region 4. The yellow highlighted streams are those 3 streams are in those subbasins where brook trout had been completely extirpated for decades. So we hit the mark there. We got 3 of those back, native brook trout populations back into those. And that stream at the top is kind of unique too. It's on privately owned land right here in the Gatlinburg area. And we partnered with the landowners there and the National Park Service, Trout Unlimited, and a couple other groups to do that project. There's a conservation easement on it, so we can go in there now and draw fish from that population if we want to do more work in that subwatershed. But that's the first one we've done where we actually took out a brook trout population to replace it with native fish. The fish that were in there were strictly hatchery origin fish that had been stocked over the years. So we took those out, put native fish in from three streams in the park, and that has done exceptionally well. So really proud of that project. So that's 10 streams that we've completed in the past 6 years, a total of 10.7 miles, and that puts us at 82% of our goal, which of that 13 to 15 miles. So we're ahead of schedule there. Really, really pleased with that progress. And this image kind of shows big picture. This is a big picture representation of how important, how significant this restoration work is. The projects that restoration enhancement projects that we've done now represent 28% of all of our brook trout populations that we have out there on the landscape right now. So 24%, nearly a quarter of all of those 119 populations that I mentioned earlier are the result of restoration enhancement work. And if I had focused that down onto just those 81 native populations, it would be more like a third, 34% of those. So really important to the resource. Most of that work was done back before 2017. But we've really ramped up our efforts lately over the past 6 years and done 10 streams. So we want to keep that momentum going forward. We're trying to add a new project at least every year, keep moving forward with that work. So here's what's on the slate to complete in the next few years. We've got 5 streams lined up there on the Cherokee. That the yellow highlighted stream, Right Prong or Rock Creek, that's that second stream in the Nolichucky Basin. It's near Irwin. So that's where the fish that Tenassi has are going to go this spring if they're successful, and hopefully they will be. So 5 streams there. If we complete those, that's another 6.3 miles. That'll give us a total of 17 for the management plan term by 2027. So nicely exceeding that goal, I think, of 13 to 15 miles. As you've probably gathered by now, these restoration projects are really driven by our conservation partners, and we've got a whole range of those: state and federal agencies, different other organizations, private landowners. And I really want to acknowledge them because there's no way we could be as productive as we've been with this work without the help of all these different groups. So really appreciate their hard work and look forward to working with them on more brook trout restoration projects in the future. And then just a few other outcomes that I want to highlight from our management plan that we hope to attain by 2027. We've got some cooperative work with the Forest Service, doing some habitat enhancement in probably the Laurel Fork watershed in Carter County. We'd like to update our brook trout GIS layer. Maybe do an online brook trout angler survey to see how many anglers are getting up to these streams to utilize that resource, and finally maybe even a wild cast featuring our native brook trout. So to conclude, the brook trout restoration work that's been done in Tennessee over the years is really important from an ecological and a native fish conservation perspective, but brook trout are sport fish too. So the angling opportunity perspective is also important. And, we want to emphasize that as well. When we're choosing these streams to do restoration projects, we've always got an eye toward that. Is it going to provide some angling opportunities? Is it going to diversify that for native brook trout? And probably the best example that we have of that right now is left prong of Hampton Creek up on the Hampton Creek Cove State Natural Area near Rome Mountain. That stream has become probably the best brook trout stream in Tennessee, and probably including the park too, just in terms of the numbers of fish that we have in there and the size and the accessibility of it and the popularity it's achieved with anglers. A lot of people fish that. So we want to create more of those destination type native brook trout fisheries where we can, so that our anglers always have the opportunity to go out there and enjoy catching our only native trout. So thank you all, and if you have any questions, be happy to answer.
Thank you, Jim. That was so the next time y'all are out trout fishing and catch trout, there's a lot of people to thank. You just never know how much hard work goes in to the fisheries that we have, especially the trout that's not a flat body of water that you can access by a boat. You got to put your hiking boots on and pack all that gear in and do your work and pack your lunch in. A lot of physical demanding work there. And we thank each and every one of you all for that.
Thank you so much. Glad to do it. It's really enjoyable. And it's funny you mentioned that. Back when we were doing some of the DNA fin clip collection and distribution work, I'd get volunteers that come out with me for one day. And after they experienced that one day, it was hard to get them to come back.
Exactly. Not a lot of flat land in our part of the country up there in Carter, Johnson, and Unicoi County. Any questions or comments from any of the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Butt.
I was interested to know, has any observation or any studies been done on the negative impact or the imprint of those fish that spawn in the aquarium and when they're released? Does that change their
It can,
identity
it certainly
any?
can. Anytime you pass a wild fish through that hatchery filter, so to speak, when you take them out of the wild, propagate them in the hatchery, you're changing things a little bit. But what we do though is we don't keep a hatchery stock at the hatchery. We'll go each year and collect wild fish, bring those back and spawn, and then release those progeny back out. And so you minimize that effect. That's a really good point, and it is a concern, but you minimize that effect as much as you can by doing it that way. And they seem to survive. We've had several successful projects that have used those propagated fish that way. So it does.
Are we tagging any of those release that to see?
Yes, there was a study done on that stream I mentioned in Rome Mountain, Laurel Fork. There was a grad student did a project on that, looking at different. In fact, we had actually propagated some fish at the Irwin hatchery as well as at Tenasseee and at Tellico. And as I recall, I don't think there was that much difference amongst those. They all seem to survive and recruit to that fishery. So.
Have we actually run any DNA genomics on some of those fish that we're capturing to identify them and identify markers for future reference?
Well, we've done genetics work before we even do the restoration work. Of course, we have genetic information there, and when we do a project, we will typically take fin clips from those fish. Let's say we've gone to 3 streams, 3 donor streams, and collected brook trout from those. We will typically keep fin clips from those. And then in the future, once that population gets established, we can go a few years later, take some fin clips off of that established population and look at it. We've done that with Left Prong at Hampton Creek as well. And sure enough, it dramatically increases the genetic robustness, variability of those populations by taking, from 2 or 3 different source streams. So it's very helpful, very beneficial that way as well.
So we're assessing any variation or comparison with the genetics from those different situations?
Yes, we've done that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Mr. Habera, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman Woods.
We're going to take a short break, 10, 12 minutes, and we'll come back with budget.
I love the state of Tennessee. I love everything about it, and I love hunting and fishing in the state of Tennessee, and what you guys do is so great. I was born and raised here, and this song is for Tennessee and everybody in it. So won't you take me back to Tennessee, where southern streams are flowing free. Me and mine, Lord, will always be right at home in Tennessee. Right at home in the woods of Tennessee. Right at home in Tennessee. Awesome.
The award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. We're glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We got a fun show for you today, Don.
Big time.
I'm
fun.
excited.
Yeah, we're going to go on the musical side of the outdoors again.
Yeah, a little campfire session.
Yeah, I
Maybe
like that.
a little
I like
music, a
that.
little outdoors.
Little session,
Yeah.
music session. Yeah, I got it.
Perfect.
I got it.
Perfect. I'm excited. Good friend of mine, Chris Hennessy, is with us today, and we've been trying to get him in here for a while. At least we've
I
been
know.
talking about it.
I know.
I hit him up, and he's like, "Sure, I'll be there."
I've been hearing about him for years, so glad to finally meet him.
Oh
today.
man, this is such a blessing to be here. I
All
appreciate
right.
you guys having me. Absolutely.
You bet.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. But first, Don, you like to highlight us a radio station?
Yeah. We are on about, over 30 radio stations now across the state. And one of them is the one we'll highlight this week is WMC in the Memphis area. It's an ESPN station now. Gosh, for years, when I was on the road doing music, Chris, WMC was a Billboard reporting country music
Oh,
station.
wow, okay.
So we've come a long way. But anyway, we're on Saturday mornings at 7:30. We
There you
follow Larry Ray's show there every Saturday morning.
Awesome.
So anyway, we appreciate them a bunch.
Yep. As we say often, we appreciate our radio partners. Couldn't do it without them.
Oh, that's right.
And thank you for tuning us in on the app, your favorite podcasting app, or finding us on YouTube, or however you find us. We appreciate you tuning us in.
You bet.
Well, Chris, man, it's good to have you. Man, it's great to be here. Hey, listen, that background track sounded good, guys. Especially the drums and guitar on that. Sound really good.
Thank you.
Little promotion there.
Yeah.
A little hard work went into that one. It was fun. Yeah, good. Good stuff. Yeah, so Chris and I grew up in Decatur. Decatur, Tennessee, and it's just good to have him in studio to talk outdoors and hunting and fishing. He loves to do that sort of thing, and music brought him to Nashville. And let's just jump right in. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself and kind of
Absolutely.
how you got where you are today.
Well, like you said, both of us from Decatur, Tennessee. And I always have to say Tennessee because if you say Decatur, you're going to get Alabama, Georgia, Illinois, you get all of them too.
Decatur County.
Yep, that's right, Decaturville. But yeah, Decatur, East Tennessee, Southeast Tennessee. Grew up there and went to school there. Went to school in Maryville, East Tennessee, and ended up in Nashville, 98, and been here ever since, picking and grinning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got a family now and settled here and doing it full
Absolutely.
time.
Yep. We're up in Sumner County, and kids go to school there, and we hunt a little bit there, and of course, we hunt all over the state. So, yeah,
Good deal.
Awesome. So, you kind of, when you got here, you're working your way through the ranks and whatever, and then you ran into Jamie Johnson. Right?
Yeah, I can tell you that story. So, I guess to make a long story short, when you're, and Don, this, when you're coming through Music Row, there's sort of like there's your class. It might not all be people your same age, but it's generally people that came to town in the general same time, and kind of moved up the ranks together.
Yeah.
So in about 2000, I was playing the honky tonks down on Lower Broadway. And it was a little different scene back then.
I tell people, back then when folks played there, a lot of times you didn't share that with many people.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, you have to be careful.
Now you do. It's
Yeah.
big time now.
Well, there's never a dull moment down there now, from what I can tell. But I can tell you this quick story. We used to play Robert's Western World down there, and there's the big glass right behind the stage. And it would be middle of the winter, 10 to 2 a.m. shift. And there would be us and the bartenders, and that's it in the whole place. And it would be freezing cold at night. And I would just look out the window. And when I saw a couple of people coming, I'd 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'd start playing the song. And when they went past the door, we'd just stop, It's like, well, what's the use? But you can't run people out of there now. There are people everywhere down there.
It's crazy.
So to carry on the story, I was playing, I think it might have been Tootsie's or somewhere down there. And this young fella walked up and said, "You mind if I sit in?" And I'm like, "Go ahead, buddy. Come on," And man, he was great. He sung some wailing or whatever. And I'm like, do another one. Heck, he took half the shift before it was over with. Anyways, he and I would just be running into each other just constantly. It was him and Randy Hauser and Jared Neiman and Dirks there was a time down there where Dirks was playing next door and Joe Nichols was playing across the street. And we were all playing the same shift every night. So anyways, there was a lot of that going on. So Jamie and I became friends. And then, of course, he hit it pretty good. And, about 5-6 years into his career,
we ran into each other at a gathering, and he said, "You need to come open shows for me," and I said, "Absolutely, let's do it." Well, that turned into a lot of shows, and that turned into touring for 12 years,
Wow.
And I'll never forget the first gig I did with him as an official band member was, we were in Hershey, Pennsylvania at Farm Aid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I walk out there, and I just played harmonica at the time. And I walked out there with my harmonica and looked out at all those people. And I'm like, Lord, what have I got myself into? And the next night we were on Letterman or something like that. So it was crazy, like
nice.
trial by fire. So, but it's been a fun run,
Awesome. Good
Awesome.
deal. Well, let's get started with some music.
Yeah.
We're already past our 4.5 minute mark, Don,
That's all right.
but that's okay. A new song you got out.
I do. Well, I'm actually going to put this out next month. I just released a single last week called God Made Her Wild. And I really wanted to play this one today. I don't know. Just I wrote this song with my granddad in mind. It's called Common Sense. My granddad was born in 1934. Seems to me they don't make them like that anymore. He was tougher than a leather glove, put his faith in God above, and an old Ford truck. He set me down the day I turned 17. He said, the whole world's going crazy, boy, it beats all I've ever seen. The price of gas is through the roof. You can't trust what's on the news. You need a lot more than love. It's been 10 years since he passed away, but I can still hear him say, love the Lord with all your heart. If you can't be where you want, be happy where you are. And don't go to fight unless you know what you're fighting for. Common sense ain't that common anymore. Common sense ain't that common anymore. He said, don't believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. Remember all the ones that died. Freedom don't come free. A boy grows up to be a man. Every child is part of God's plan. They ought to get a chance. And a hard day's work, Lord, it's good for you. But don't get in over your boots. And love the Lord with all your heart. You can't be where you want, be happy where you are. And don't go to fight unless you know what you're fighting for. Common sense ain't that common anymore. Lord, common sense ain't that common anymore. Now I got 2 kids of my own. Before I know it, they'll be up and grown. But I don't worry about who they'll be or where they'll go, 'cause I know they know. You gotta love the Lord with all your heart. Do unto others, now that's the place to start. And don't go to fight unless you know what you're fighting for. Common sense ain't that common anymore. Oh, common sense ain't that common anymore. Nice.
Amen. Speaking the truth there. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I try to.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. I can picture your grandpa and all that stuff. It's just the imagery that puts out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, good segue, because we'll talk about my granddad, and I'll tell you about the first times I went hunting.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I mean, growing up in Decatur, everybody hunts and fishes.
Yeah.
And your grandpa was a big part of that.
He was a great Tennessean, as your grandpa was too, and your dad and your whole family. But he really was. And I remember going quail hunting with him constantly. And, it's kind of funny, bless his heart. He'd be like, I'll come pick you up before daylight. And I'm like, wait a minute, before daylight. But anyways, I will never forget. And I hope that everybody listening to this thinks about this, because man, your kids are paying so much attention when they're this age. But I bet you I was 9 years old, and we were behind Shaw Industries down there in this old, thicket. And we kicked up a covey of quail, and I shot once, and then they flew over the hill and no birds fell. He said, why didn't you shoot again? I said, well, they were gone before I could pull the trigger the second time. The quail are fast. They're not that fast, though. I can pull the trigger quicker than that now. But anyways, we hunted a lot back then, quail. And I'll tell this one other story just quick as I can.
Yeah, go.
So my nephew, Matthew, he was just a little fella, could just barely talk. He could get Chris or Papaw out, and that was about it. Well, we were going to take the dogs out one day and try to find a covey. And Granny said, now don't you take him and start shooting guns around him. He's just little. Oh, don't worry, Granny. We won't do it.
Yeah, right.
So we pulled up, and I didn't even know if we had a gun, in the truck. Yeah, it was up to Papaw. And sure enough, boy, them dogs pointed right there. And now Matthew's going to stay in the truck. And Chris, you get the gun. I said, gun? We're not supposed to be shooting, Papaw. Get the gun and get out. And if you get one up, just go ahead and shoot it. Well, I kicked it up, bow, shot it. I don't know. I forget the rest of that story. Anyways, we got home that afternoon, and Granny says, Matthew, did you have fun? Oh, yes. Well, how was the trip? He said, Chris, bird dog, gun, boom. We were all in trouble that night. But we spent a lot of time quail hunting. So.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't realize this until we started chatting, but pheasant hunting was big for your granddad too, right?
It was, yeah. He started with Raymond Bivens which you would know that family, back in the 70s, going to South Dakota to other side of Sioux Falls and pheasant hunting. They'd go every year. So when I got old enough, my cousin, he'd start taking us and and my uncle, my dad. So we, every October would go to South Dakota and pheasant hunt. So now, Papaw's gone, but we still go. That's and awesome. Still keep in touch with the same family. And, we'd stay in their basement and the whole deal,
Yeah.
But my kids go now. So,
awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
That's neat. Yeah. Keeping the traditions alive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So growing up or once you got to Nashville and playing music, you traveled a lot. Did you do a lot of hunting on the road, or?
We didn't do a whole lot. It's difficult because we'd show up somewhere that morning and do the show that night and leave. So but we fished a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
We did do a lot of fishing, whether it was, trout I always took my rod and reel. We bass fished different places, but we didn't get to hunt a lot. But I made a lot of connections that after this touring season was over, we would, do some hunting and stuff. But I always spend, when it comes to big game and stuff, I'm a Tennessee guy, I grew up whitetail hunting, and that's what I continue to do now,
nice.
With most of my fall and winter anyway.
Yeah. So how do you prepare for this fall? I mean, it's here, it's football season, it's deer season.
Yeah.
How are you getting ready?
Well,
are you just pulling the gun out of the closet?
That's it. Yeah. It's tricky for me because touring has always made it difficult to, do a lot of, fixing the food plots and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the good news is, as a musician and as a, singer, artist or whatever, made a lot of connections through the years. And I've got some buddies around the state that are like, come on down and hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a place in Wayne County that we hunt a lot. My buddy, Kyle Helton's a sheriff down in Giles County, and we go down to his property and hunt a lot. So whether it's turkey or deer, we're pretty well covered as far as that's concerned. But it is that time of year, and especially a day like this. I mean, I know this will come out later, but it's like, man, it's cool.
It's getting cooled off.
Yeah, and it's rainy, and the leaves are starting to fall a little bit. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's kicking into gear now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear the music is opening those doors.
It does.
Hunting opportunities.
It sure does. Absolutely.
Fishing too, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's good that you got your buddies that'll let you come down and hunt.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Yeah. Well, we might have to pick a song or two for them every once in a while, but but man, my kids load up and go with me,
definitely.
And it's just great. It really is.
That's very cool. Very cool.
I don't really think that, when it comes to deer and turkey and the such, my day is kind of come and went, and now it's all about the boys, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I just focus on, getting them in front of something and getting it on the ground.
Yeah.
How old are they now?
9 and 11.
9 and 11.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're right there in the same boat I'm in.
Yeah.
They are,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, 8, he's almost 9, and he's almost 12 actually. So
Yeah.
we're right there, but they love it, and took them dove hunting last week, and
Perfect.
yeah, which actually worked out good. It's a funny story there too. I went 2 weekends. I went last weekend and this weekend. I took them the first weekend, and it was great because I didn't have to pick up any empty shells or any birds. And I didn't take them this weekend. Man, I was working myself to death, picking up shells and birds and all this stuff. So, anyways, we have a lot of fun. So,
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. So, one last question on hunting. You got deer, and you got one in your sights for this year? Or
This
I guess
year,
not, maybe.
I don't. I haven't had a chance to really set up anything. But again, I go back to the kid thing where I'm like, man, we go out and kill some does, and we process the whole thing at the house and put
Very
them
cool.
in the freezer, you know.
Yeah,
So
show them how it's done.
that's what we're thinking on now. And I always tell them, hey man, if a 12-pointer walks out, let's get him. But if not, you know, we'll take a doe and not think twice about it, you know. So
Well, I let a decent 8 walk last year, thinking that get my son on it. You
Yeah.
know, my daughter was with me, and I
Yeah.
was like, "We're gonna let this one go." And she's
Right.
like, "Why didn't you shoot that?"
yeah, why?
It's like let Tucker shoot it. No, it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna do another song and maybe 2 other songs. You want to go ahead and Twilight?
Yeah.
Twilight from the South or
Yeah,
of the
Twilight in the South. So I'll tell you this, and it's kind of interesting that we're talking about it today because this was the title track off a record I did a couple years ago. And so again, I'm tell a lot of stories, but when I first wrote this song, it's probably about 15 years ago. And, you know, and as you know, Don, when you write a song, you demo it, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So back in those days when we were demoing our songs, I wrote it with a guy named Chris Dubois, who's a big hunter, Tennessee guy. We were looking for somebody to sing the demo, so Chris Stapleton was singing demos at the time. So I've for the last 10 years been listening to Stapleton sing this song, and my wife has too, and she goes, "That's your best song you got right there." And I said, "Is it because Chris Stapleton's singing it?" But the reason that I'm saying this is a good setting to play this song is that when I wrote this song with Chris, my thought was all about my grandparents' back porch on Highway 58.
Okay, yeah.
Looking over at your grandparents' house over there across the creek. So that's where this is in my mind. An old man's on the tractor with his headlights on, trying to cut the pasture for the daylight's gone. Woman in the kitchen, you can hear her sing. Smell that fried chicken through the window screen. You can smell that fried chicken through the screen. Well, the sun's going down, lightning bugs are out. There's just something about twilight in the South. Well, you can see the whitetail peeking through the tall pine trees. Smell that honeysuckle in the early evening breeze. Me, I've been out working in the sun all day, so I'm hitching up the John boat to that old Chevrolet. I'm gonna stop and grab a 6-pack on the way. Well, the windows are down, June bugs are out. There's just something about twilight in the South. Way down the round where Tennessee turns into Alabama, but when summer days turn into summer nights, well, there's a honey hole a mile below that Chickamauga Dam, where I guarantee the fish are gonna bite. And I guarantee that's where I'll be tonight. Yeah, 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 yeah. When that sun's going down and the lightning bugs are out, there's just something about twilight in the south. There's just something about twilight in the south. You know, that's that magic time, right? When the fish are biting and the deer are coming out the grave.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I can picture that, just like you said. It's right there in our backyard.
Right on, man.
Speaking of Chickamauga, man, state record smallmouth came out of, or largemouth out of Chickamauga. So
Yeah, right. Like back in
right
the day,
down
right?
our back door. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a fellow, wasn't it King?
Mr. Gabe King.
Yeah, Gabe
Yeah.
King. Yeah, I know his dad well. Yeah.
Growing up right there in that area, and just knowing that the big fish are coming out of that water, that's pretty cool.
Right.
Man, I'm telling you, yeah, we've spent a lot of time fishing, especially catfishing right down through there in the river, and never know what you're going to pull up out of that water. So, big old cat.
Yeah. So we're going to get another song in before we have to close out the show, but faux fishing, this is a good time of year to go, cooling off.
Yeah.
Not just hunting, fishing's a good time right now as well.
It is. It's great. And man, I tell you what, we've talked to my son a little bit, the older son, about joining the bass team, that kind of stuff. And there is some great stuff going on in the state as far as, youth fishing and the high school and the middle schools and even younger that getting into that stuff. And wow, I mean, hats off to the state for doing what they're doing with that. It's really great.
Yeah. One of our guys, David Lowry, he's volunteers and heads up that Tennessee Bass Nation series, and it's great for the kids.
It really is. It's great. And but yes, it's that time of year, and what I love about this time of year is topwater. I love buzz baits. It's my favorite thing in the world to fish with, and when they start hitting that topwater stuff, I mean, that's what it's all about right there. I love it.
Get your heart pounding.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. I could tell stories about that too, but I won't do that.
Yeah. And then the creek fishing too. It's a good time to get out and wade those creeks. I always say that, but that's my favorite.
Well, again, now you know this Sioux Creek back home.
Yep.
We used to go down in there, and it was, we were always say when the dogwoods start blooming, when they start running,
start running,
and that's some of my favorite fishing I ever did. Whether we were wading or we'd take old boat, canoes and stuff up through there. And I might have had to go see your granddad a time or two because I missed school a few times to go fishing. But anyways, I do not recommend doing that. Don't miss any days of school.
No.
But if you get an off day, go fishing.
Go fishing.
Yeah.
Sioux Creek was a fun place. For those folks that live down that area, you got to go check out Sioux Creek.
You do.
It's a fun creek to fish.
Great.
Me and my brother-in-law put a paddle boat on top of a Ford Festiva.
Oh yeah.
Strapped it on top, went and dropped it in the water, and had a good time one day.
That's great. That's one of the only places I know of that there's more rooster tails in the trees than there are in the water.
Oh man.
And that was the bait too.
That was
the bait.
Yeah, white. You can't use the yellow one though. You got to use a white one.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Rapala rooster tail. That's all you can use.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
so we don't run out of time. You got one more song you wanted to do, Back to Tennessee.
I
right?
do. That's right. Yeah. And this song was on that same record. And the reason I told you guys earlier before we got started that I wanted to play this one is because I'm lobbying for this to be the new TWRA theme song.
All right.
Here.
Okay.
So whoever we got to pass this along to.
Don't mess it up then.
That's right. Oh man, the pressure's on. The pressure's on. But I will say this before I play it. I love the state of Tennessee.
All right, everybody, let's get started back where we can go enjoy a good supper tonight. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the Budget Committee. Chairman Bill Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got some budget items and Deputy Director. It was fish, and now it's fiscal.
That's it. All right. Can you all hear me? Thumbs up there. Okay, good. All right. I've got a few budget expansions to request and the typical financial report to report. So I'll start with the budget expansions, and there are 4 of them. And just to start, none of these budgets will have any effect on the reserve. They're all federally funded, or you'll see that the one has a match provided by the National Wild Turkey Federation Foundation. And so that's the good news on all these. So I'll go through them one at a time, and I might ask the chairman to maybe propose these as one group to the chairman when I'm done, and then I'll go on to the report. Okay, so the first one is an FY24 budget expansion of $32,000 for turkey habitat at Swan WMA. This will be a federally reimbursed project at 75%, and the 25% match should be $8,000 was provided by the Wild Turkey Federation. And that was made possible by a donation through the Austin Knight Foundation. This is a foundation to remember a young man who was very interested in the outdoors that died in a car wreck at Swan. So that's the first project. The second project is FY24. The next 3 are invasive carp funding. These dollars come from the Fish and Wildlife Service carp base funds, and we get these grants annually, so we need to add the money to our budget to operate. The first one is $722,000, $390 for what we would consider our monitoring. This is looking for carp. Where are they? How are they moving? Are they having reproductive success? Very basic population monitoring. The second one for FY24 is $650,000, which is for a carp harvest incentive program that will be on the Mississippi River and tributaries. Now, up to this year, all the work we've done with incentivizing carp harvest in Tennessee has been targeted on the Tennessee Cumberland rivers, because that was a very strategic place to work. And only because additional funding has become available and it's earmarked for that basin on the lower Miss, they call it, we're allowed to work on the Mississippi River, which would include Reelfoot and any of the tribs in that area. What I see as a benefit to this is, we're never going to take all the invasive carp out of the Mississippi River. That's a natural, every year those fish reproduce. So you will never harvest them down, but it will give the industry a stable place to work if they were not able to get what they need out of the Tennessee Cumberland at some point. So it will beef up the industry, and that's one of the immediate effects of this funding. And we're going to administer this the same way we do the existing T-chip program, except if the fish come from that part of the world, they get funding from that source. And the last item here is FY25, $1.5 million for the ongoing carp harvest incentive program that we have on Tennessee and Cumberland rivers. And that's the one that's on Barkley, Kentucky, Old Hickory and such. But most of the fish are coming out of Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake. And these carp projects are 1 year. And I forgot to mention the turkey project is a 4-year project. So that will recur the next 3 years after FY24. And that concludes the request for budget expansions.
Thank you, Frank. We will consider these in one motion, and someone on the committee would give me a motion and a second. Need a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Committee members, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. I have a question, Frank. If my memory serves me, and sometimes it doesn't, we budgeted money from reserves to cover a delay in funding from the federal government for the carp incentive. It seems to me that to cover us for the waiting on that money so they could continue to fish.
What what I think I'm remembering about this is that for a few years, we were bringing this to you as a 1-year thing, like as I am today, as a 1-year budget expansion. And then we thought, boy, it might work better if we just have a recurring budget for the approximate amount so we don't have to come annually to request it. Maybe that was the cover that you remembered.
Well,
But
basically-
from an administrative, accounting, and grant management side, we tried it. We tried it the other way. It failed. It made more work than it was worth, and we're back to doing it with one
It
year.
just seems like we
request.
were running out of money before we got the funding back, and we didn't want them to stop fishing. So we plugged the hole to be reimbursed by the feds when we got the money. The question is, we're not spending and haven't spent any license dollars on carp.
No. There was 1 year when we had a contractual problem where we lost 3 days, and we turned around and used funds that were actually with the foundation that were collected for carp management that we did.
Okay.
That was a nominal amount of money.
All right.
We're, of course, all money that's spent out the door is state dollars, and then it's reimbursed. But effectively, this is all 100% federal.
I have a question.
All right. Go ahead.
Hey, Frank, I know probably maybe tomorrow if you could get it, but this is about $3 million, and I know it's federal money. What do we spend annually on carp, and what are the total results? I hadn't seen those numbers in a while. I'd just like an update if you could get that.
I can get that, and I'll tell you the existing incentive program, if that's the part you're asking about, we're hitting our target of about 8 million pounds a year being reimbursed. But I'll ask for a total on what the
Dollars and pounds.
yeah, dollar, and as well as management.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
okay.
I appreciate it.
Are you going to try to get that for tomorrow or at a later date?
Tomorrow. Yeah. We should be able to pull that off the budgets.
Okay, at some point in the future, it'd be good if we got an update. I'd like an update from whoever on how the market, and you keep hearing about these guys moving here and having reefers and what they're doing with it. And sometime next few months, like an update on how that's working.
Yeah.
So that's the only way to get rid of them.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions? Financial report.
Okay, we'll move on. So we were able to, we skipped September. We're caught up through October. And I'll start with the boating fund. You'll see here that we're real on the registration income for boating. That's where we get our income. We projected a little over 2 million. That's what we've collected to date. Effectively, we're on track. Our expense to budget is actually lower than past years, but some of that is due to that we are still holding and giving out the marine grant program. So that was a new couple $1 million that are mixed into the boating fund that weren't in there 3 years ago. That affects that number, but we're not overspending for sure on boating right now. On the wildlife, we are a little ahead, just barely, of our projections on the what we are collecting. Even though we projected to do better this year, we actually are doing better, and we're about 2.5 million ahead of where we were last year if you just look at straight revenues, not forgetting what was projected. On the expense to budget, we're at about 21.9%, and that's about where we were supposed to be. Wetlands acquisition, you see here our beginning balance at the beginning of the year. We finally are showing some income. We get monthly statements from revenue, but they don't always post in the first couple months. They're starting to catch up now. So we've had 4 million collected on our books, and we have spent about 4 million. And that almost all of that is in maintenance of our state-owned properties. And here's the summary of our reserve balances. We have the invested pieces on the left side here. Those are the dollar amounts that were invested since inception. But the current market value is lower in all those cases. We had a really rough couple months in bonds, which is what most of this is invested in. We could recover all that in a couple months to come if things turn around, but that's where we're at now. And then that SPIF balance, those are the dollars that are not in the investment that we hold, and they're earning about 5.4%. So the balance on the far right is our total balance in those different funds as of the end of October. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or any clarification needed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Cox. Is there any other business from the commissioners, the director, anyone from the public? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? Adjourned.